They greet you with a smile when you walk in, then start talking the second you're gone. You may not notice it, but Machiavelli would. To him, gossip wasn't harmless chatter. It was a calculated tactic, wielded by the cowardly to undermine those they secretly resent, without ever drawing a blade. And if you don't move with both intent and intelligence, you become their amusement, their story, their slow undoing. Because make no mistake, gossip isn't just idle speech, it's a quiet battle for influence. Machiavelli believed a leader could endure betrayal, outlast exile, even conquer armies but still lose everything if they failed to control the storyline. Your reputation walks ahead of you, and gossip corrupts it like poison slipped into wine, subtle but deadly. Here's the harsh truth. Confronting gossipers with emotion won't save you. You beat them by mastering the game, and Machiavelli offered 5 brutally precise ways to do just that. Rule 1. Never behave how they expect. Gossipers thrive when you react emotionally. They want you to respond, to explain, to defend, because the moment you do, you legitimize the rumor. You've already surrendered. You've acknowledged their version of events. Machiavelli would say, the man who defends himself has already invited suspicion. So when the whispers reach you, respond with something unnerving. A smile. Act amused even if it stings. Because silence suggests control. It signals that you're unfazed, unbothered, that you've heard the noise and deemed it unworthy of acknowledgement. This calculated detachment drives gossipers insane. They anticipate heat, you give them cold. Which brings us to rule 2. Quietly isolate the weakest link. Machiavelli observed that gossipers are never acting alone. There's always a courier, someone pretending to warn you. But genuine allies don't carry flames, they stamp them out. When someone relays gossip to you, they're not just giving information, they're running a test. Will you crack? Will you lash out? Will you blame someone? Machiavelli wouldn't seek the loudest voice. He'd look for the weakest allegiance. That person? They'd simply fade from his circle. No drama, no confrontation, just quiet exclusion. Because gossip falters when it hits uncertainty, when the instigator doesn't know who exposed them and starts to feel observed. That creeping fear? It's a Machiavellian masterpiece. If you want gossip to never take root, you must follow Rule 3. Be unpredictable. Gossip attaches itself to patterns. Predictable people hand their enemies a manual. They reveal how they'll react, what they'll deny, and how to entrap them with half-truths. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must appear to be everything but commit to none of it. If you're always stoic, laugh. If you're known for being warm, grow distant. If you're always visible, disappear. This unpredictability disarms the gossiper's narrative. They can't summarize you. They can't categorize you because you don't allow a tan that unsettles them. Gossipers thrive on familiarity, and what they can't predict unnerves them. The 4th strategy is perhaps the most merciless. Elevate someone else in plain view. Gossipers seek dominance by dragging others down. Machiavelli's answer? Not self-defense, but a show of allegiance to someone loyal. Make your compliments intentional. In meetings, in group settings, even online, shine the light on someone whose loyalty is unquestioned. That achieves 2 things. It diverts attention and isolates the instigator. They'll sense the cold edge of being left out, and everyone around will take note without a single accusation. Machiavelli never believed in calling people out. He moved through patterns, silent decisions, and precise consequences. Then comes the final maneuver. Checkmate. Turn gossip into your instrument. Machiavelli often kept adversaries close, not out of trust, but for tactical advantage. If you know someone is a source of rumors, don't confront, manipulate. Feed them small, harmless pieces of fabricated or trivial information, just enough to make them feel informed and influential. Then observe, who do they tell, how quickly, and what extra spice they add. Without realizing it, they become your informant, and if they overstep, you've got all the proof needed to dismantle their reputation completely. Because gossipers aren't powerful, they're frightened. Frightened of being ignored, of losing relevance, of encountering someone like you who plays the long strategy. Machiavelli didn't crush enemies in anger, he dismantled them with surgical precision. And gossipers? They're simply vipers waiting for winter. Even when exposed, they'll never admit fault. They tilt their heads, feign innocence, and spin it as concern. I was just worried. It's what I heard. Or worse, I thought you should be aware of what people are saying. Machiavelli saw through the act. He knew gossip, like all subtle weapons, doesn't begin with rage. It starts in quiet jealousy. They envy your composure, your confidence, your presence, but they're too timid to face you directly. So they slice at your image slowly, one rumor at a time. That's why Machiavelli never argued. To defend yourself is to step into their arena. He chose another battlefield zone they couldn't even detect. Picture this in practice. You're at work, at a family event among friends. Suddenly you feel it: quiet stares, offhand comments, a shift in tone. You're being talked about, and someone you trusted is at the core of it. Your first instinct? To confront, to clear the air. But Machiavelli would warn you, why show your hand? Why reveal your awareness? Instead, you watch. You track who avoids your gaze, who stops sharing, who flinches when others make jokes at your expense. That's when the second principle comes alive. Discreetly eliminate the weak link. Don't make a scene, just make them irrelevant. If they were assigned to a project, remove them. If they were in your social circle, quietly shift your presence away. And most importantly, you remain composed, maybe even cheerful. Nothing unsettles gossipers more than your indifference. It shakes their sense of power. It makes them doubt themselves. Because suddenly their rumor didn't damage you, transformed you. And they can't explain why. Here's where it gets interesting. The moment they sense uncertainty, they'll try to regain footing. You'll get casual texts, harmless conversations, attempts to pretend everything's normal. This is where unpredictability becomes your weapon. Respond erratic, sometimes distant, sometimes cordial, sometimes utterly silent. Break the rhythm. Disrupt their expectations. Machiavelli believed influence is built on patterns, and the way to dismantle someone's influence is to destroy the template they rely on. When you spotlight someone else, someone loyal and often overlooked, that's your masterstroke. Gossipers crave attention like fire craves air. When you reward loyalty publicly, it achieves two outcomes. It pulls the spotlight off the gossiper and sets a new benchmark for what earns your favor. They'll feel the threat of replacement. And for a gossiper, nothing is more terrifying than irrelevance. But the ultimate move? Use them. Once you've identified the gossiper and ensured they can't touch your reputation, Machiavelli would turn them into an asset. Feed them crumbs. Leak an embellished, inconsequential bit of information. Say you're mulling over a bold pivot, or that you're teaming up with someone unexpected. Then sit back. Listen. Observe. You'll discover just how fast your words travel, who repeats them, and how they mutate. You've entered the battlefield of information contraland now. You command it. Still, Machiavelli would leave you with one last caution. Never view a gossiper as the enemy. See them as a byproduct. Because gossip isn't born in silence, it thrives in spaces that reward weakness, where popularity outweighs performance. So don't just cut the gossiper out, alter the environment that bred them. Make loyalty visible. Let betrayal have a price. Celebrate strength. That's how you eliminate gossip, not temporarily, but permanently. In Machiavelli's eyes, you're not a casualty of rumor. You're the designer of reality. And when you master perception, you master authority. Power doesn't always announce itself, it often whispers in advance, just like gossipers do. They seed doubt before you ever speak. They soften the ground beneath you so your voice trembles. They drip uncertainty into your image, so no matter how stable you appear, others begin to doubt what they once admired. Machiavelli had a name for this tactic: the invisible ambush. But here's what set him apart from ordinary tacticians. He didn't merely respond to danger, he foresaw it. To Machiavelli, Reputation was like armor. Once it cracked, every opponent became bolder. His solution? Don't wait for gossip to arrive, vaccinate your image before it spreads. How? You shape your legend. Rumors breed in the absence of definition. So you give people something stronger in identity, too distinct, too vivid, too formidable to twist. Machiavelli moved among politicians and sovereigns who constantly whispered his name. They called him heartless, sly, ruthless. And what did he do? He embraced it. He became the very shadow they feared completely and unapologetically. Their whispers didn't weaken him, they magnified the myth. It's counterintuitive. Most try to fix how they're seen, but Machiavelli knew. The more you seek to be liked, the more you invite scrutiny. But if you appear formidable, you dominate the narrative. So if they label you cold, get colder. If they accuse you of scheming, prove them right. If they say you're ruthless, make disloyalty costly. They'll try to mold your image like clay. Your job is to turn to stone. But here's the subtle mastery. Don't become too obvious. Machiavelli wasn't about flamboyant strength. He wielded a quiet enigma, because when people can't predict your next move, they don't know how to frame you. And if they guess wrong often enough, they stop trying. This gives way to a more sophisticated strategy. Turn the gossiper into your public supporter. It seems unlikely, but here's how it works. After isolating them socially, feeding them false leads, and draining their influence, you give them a sliver of visibility. Not as a peer, not as a friend, but as a token ally, in full view. Maybe you compliment a minor task they did. Maybe you drop their name in passing, with just enough warmth. You grant them the illusion of proximity, but on your terms. The genius of it? Now they have something to protect. Gossipers operate freely when there's no consequence. But the moment they're perceived as close to power, even superficially, they become guardians of that illusion. They begin to self-regulate. They won't risk new rumors because exposure would cost them the position they just gained. In fact, they might even defend you just to maintain access. Machiavelli never confused usefulness with loyalty, but he always exploited it. And if they slip again, you've already staged the perfect collapse, public, indisputable, and complete. Because here's the core truth. It's not just about silencing the gossiper. It's about sending a message one every quiet spectator hears. This is what happens when you casually drop my name. That's what real power does. It doesn't raise its voice. It leans in and silences the room. And Machiavelli's final stroke of genius? He never had to lift a sword. He let gossipers destroy themselves. All he had to do was wait, adjust his position, and at the right moment give the rumor just enough air to lead them off a cliff. The fall of a gossiper should never resemble revenge. It should feel like gravity, smooth, inevitable, quiet. That's how Machiavelli would stage it, not through anger, but through meticulous strategy. He knew the moment your response becomes emotional, your authority erodes. You look reactive, petty, weakened. But when the gossiper collapses beneath the weight of their own lies while you remain poised, composed, untouchable, that's true influence. So how do you make that happen? By doing the one thing they never expect, turning their audience against them. A gossiper without an audience is just someone muttering nonsense into a void. Machiavelli's genius wasn't just in neutralizing enemies, but in reshaping the crowd that surrounded them. He believed every social circle held unseen hierarchies. The respected, the feared, the disregarded, and the useful. Gossipers usually assume they belong in the first category. Your task? Quietly reassign them in everyone's minds permanently. Start by sowing subtle doubt, not with accusations, but with careful, timely observations. Isn't it odd how they always seem to know private things about everyone? Have you noticed they're always involved when something stirs up? You're not blaming, you're drawing a map. And gradually, others begin seeing the pattern they once overlooked. Then, you step back and let the gossiper perform. Let them weave their usual fabric of whispers. Only this time, your silence becomes thunder. You maintain eye contact, offer a half smile, say nothing yet say it all. Those around you will sense the change. They'll feel the unease in the air. Here's what Machiavelli grasped better than most. Gossipers reveal more about themselves than anyone else. The more they talk, the more panicked they appear. The more they spread stories, the more fragile they seem. So Machiavelli wouldn't silence them, he'd amplify their voice until it turned back on them. And when they finally crossed the wrong line, targeted the wrong person, made one misstep you wouldn't need to act, their collapse would become a collective realization. Everyone would see them clearly. They were never clever, never calculated, just noise. And you stayed motionless, above the fray, unshaken. But Machiavelli would take it a step further, a move most avoid. He would turn the gossiper's fall into a quiet warning. No boasting, no spectacle, just the weight of implication. Your restraint becomes legend. Your unpredictability becomes folklore. People begin to wonder, if even they couldn't get away with it, what would happen to me? That's how real authority is formed, not by constant defense, but by a few deliberate defeats that echo loudly. Because gossip doesn't vanish by itself. It ends when people start asking, what if this gets back to them? That's the psychological space Machiavelli operated in, where your name alone shifts behavior, where even in your absence people adjust their tone, and when that happens you've achieved something rare, not just the end of gossip but untouchability. At this stage the gossiper is silent, but silence isn't surrender, and Machiavelli would be the first to caution you. A defeated enemy isn't truly neutralized unless you assign them a new identity. If you don't, they return bruised, humiliated, and quietly plotting. Because gossip isn't merely a habit, it's a survival mechanism for those without real power. When they can't rise through ability, they try to rise by corrosion, chipping away at others until they appear taller. That's why Machiavelli's final tactic isn't punishment, it's containment. You don't exile the gossiper, you enclose them in a cage, one lined with gold. You place them in a role that is visible, flattering, yet functionally powerless. It appeals to their ego but shackles their influence. Let them feel important, let them feel watched. They'll spend all their energy maintaining appearances instead of plotting. And more crucially, others will understand, your mercy is still control. That's how real leaders operate, not by wiping out every threat, but by redefining them. And while that former gossiper beams in photos, agrees in meetings, and pretends to hold sway, you hold the truth. They've been symbolically disarmed. Machiavelli employed this method often in political courts. When he couldn't eliminate an opponent without causing instability, he turned them into monuments of his supremacy. Everyone remembered who they once were. Everyone saw what they became. And that transformation sent a message more powerful than any execution. I don't just conquer, I reshape. Let's zoom out. These 5 tactics: deliberate silence, strategic exclusion, unpredictable conduct, tactical praise, and reputational redefinition aren't just isolated tricks. They're a framework, a comprehensive method for preserving your influence, steering the narrative, and asserting dominance in any social terrain. Whether you operate in business, among friends, on a public platform, or in digital communities, these approaches don't merely silence gossipers. They create legacy. Because to the Machiavellian mind, the greatest tragedy is possessing strength and appearing fragile. And gossip? That's where fractures begin. So never let their whispers go unchecked. Don't let them write your story. Make your presence so defined, so deliberate, so formidable that even your silence carries weight. Let them murmur. Let them plan in shadows. Let them weave their traps. And then, without a shout, without spectacle, you strip the ground from beneath them. Step by calculated step. Eventually, words stop wounding and start fading into background noise. That's what Machiavelli aimed for, not just quiet from his rivals, but their irrelevance. Because when a gossiper's voice is so diminished, so dismissed, so pitied they cease to matter, they become a warning. But how do you rise above the noise? By mastering the final, invisible tier of power. A reputation that enters the room before you do. Machiavelli knew no matter how clever your strategy, no matter how flawless your game, your image arrives before your voice is ever heard. If you truly want to be immune to gossip, not merely resistant but untouchable, you must build a myth around yourself. One so intentional, so unwavering, so quietly formidable that no rumor can take hold. This has nothing to do with being well-liked. It's about being fundamentally understood, that you are not someone to be taken lightly, that flippant words spoken about you carry weight, that your silence doesn't signal absence but threat. You shape your presence like a blade. You don't overshare. You don't chase validation. Your actions leave shadows. Your words spark questions. You speak rarely, but when you do, it resonates. You praise sparingly, but when it comes, it elevates. You punish infrequently, but when it happens, it becomes unforgettable. All of this forms the one thing Machiavelli held above all: deterrence. Gossip lives where people think there's no price to pay, no fallout, no notice. But once they start wondering, what if they find out? What would they do? Would there be a reaction? The gossip withers before it ever reaches a tongue. Because fear not famous, what protects you in your absence. And Machiavelli believed the greatest power wasn't in being constantly talked about, but in the hesitation just before your name is mentioned. That's the pinnacle. That's when you become more than a peer, you become a presence. Not someone in the room, but someone felt in it. And gossipers? They don't aim at legends. They whisper about the insecure. They attack the undefended. They hunt the vulnerable. But you're none of those, because now, you don't fight gossipers, you erase their relevance. You reduce their chatter to static. While they scavenge for attention, you build a realm where actions speak louder than rumors, and silence feels like thunder. That is Machiavelli's doctrine: cold, exact, unforgettable. In a world filled with quiet schemes, you become the reason voices fall silent.